All right, let's move to the Big Ten because that's what we're really here to do. Big Ten football starts this week, which is exciting. We'll be at Penn State, and we'll get to that game last and in detail. But let's start with Ohio State because I'm curious your thoughts. They take on Indiana to start their season on the road. The QB thing is the biggest
Yeah.
storyline for them. It was interesting as I was kind of going through and looking through because I was like, man, Ryan Day hasn't had a whole lot of quarterbacks. It's really been pretty consistent.
Right.
And I looked full time, he's had Justin Fields and CJ Stroud, and that's it. And I'm not saying he's going to ever find two guys just as talented as those two guys. There's a good chance he can because it's Ohio State. But this year it's very different. You've got Kyle McCord and Devin Brown that are still battling for that top spot. And there's a lot of reports saying that there's a good chance they'll go dual quarterback in week one. So what do you see out of the Ohio State quarterback battle? What do you expect from the Buckeyes this year?
Well, whoever it is, first of all, whoever it is, the talent around the quarterback at the skill position at Ohio State is as good as anywhere in the country. I mean, the wide receiver room's ridiculous. The running back room is healthy now and loaded with depth. So whoever's playing, and if it's more than one, they just got to get the ball in the hands of the right people, and the skill will take over. And Ohio State's schedule, I don't think, is all that challenging until they get to that Notre Dame game. They will clearly outmatch their first three opponents and give both of those quarterbacks a chance to emerge. I mean, whether Ryan Day doesn't really know who his number one guy is or not, a lot of times people will say, there's two ways of thinking about this, Noah. Sometimes people say if you have two quarterbacks, that means you have no quarterback.
Sure.
And you can't make a decision. But I don't think that's always the case. I think, look, Nick Saban is not saying who his starting quarterback is at Alabama, right? And they're considered to be a championship contending team. I remember last year, Jim Harbaugh said, hey, I'm a former quarterback, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this guy in game one. I'm going to play another guy in game two, and then we'll make a decision from there. And a lot of people thought that was a crazy idea. I actually thought it was a good idea. Rather than try to mix them into the same game, let them have a game where they don't have to worry about when they're coming out or how many series they get, or if they make a mistake, do they get to go back out? So, it'll be interesting to see what Ryan Day does with the quarterback position. They're obviously both talented kids, both recruited to go there and play, both competitive kids, great skill around them, good offensive line. And again, I think with Ohio State, the biggest thing will be how good will their defense be in year two under Jim Knowles. They were good against most of the teams they played in conference, but at the end against Michigan and Georgia, they weren't very good. So how big of a jump do they make in year two under Jim Knowles?
It's an excellent question. And I think the point you make about just the overall talent, I'm not sure there's any team in the country that has more top tier talent than Ohio State at the skill positions at minimum. And of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. leads that group, and he's going to get all the accolades and all the attention, rightfully so. But you go down the list of that running back room, as you mentioned, and the full receiving core and everybody. So I'm excited about that. And I know Brian Hartline's excited about that now, taking over as the offensive coordinator. I'm curious your perspective on this, because Brian had an excellent NFL career himself, but he was a guy who had to really grind. He had to do everything, a little bit harder and better than everybody to make sure he stayed in the NFL as long as he did. How do you feel players like that, who maybe weren't as just naturally gifted, but worked their tails off to get to where they were, become better coaches?
Well, I think the same way you grind, right? You grind as a coach. I mean, I remember when Brian Hartline was just toying with the idea of whether he wanted to be a coach. He's from Canton, Ohio, which is where I'm from. I remember Brian came to I had a quarterback camp for high school kids, and Brian was a quarterback early in his high school career, and he came to my camp. His brother Mike, who is now the wide receiver coach at the University of Charlotte, North Carolina, Charlotte. They're coaches, and he's worked really hard. Once he decided to make a full-gone commitment to being a coach, which is a hard job, long hours and recruiting, and he's carved out a tremendous niche as a recruiter, right? I mean, he's already well known as that. He's become a really good position coach. And so the next step for a guy like that is to try his hand at being a coordinator. I have no idea whether he has aspirations of being a head coach, but I think he's ready for the challenge. And he's a guy that, he understands learning from the people that have been ahead of him in that coordinator role and a play caller role, and he'll lean on the rest of the guys on that staff as well. But I think Brian's an excellent coach, and he's ready for this challenge.